Hare Krishna.
Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Jai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Ram, Ram.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Jai Śrīla Prabhupada. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Śrīvāsadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda. It's the Bhagavad Gita as it is, translated with commentaries by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So I was curious, because the Dhritarasthra, the blind king, it was such a terrible thing that happened. All his sons were killed in the war of Kurukshetra. He had 100 sons. They were all killed. And he was blind from birth. And so I was wondering, what kind of a living entity takes that birth? The reason he was blind from birth is that he was conceived by Srila Vyasadeva, who's actually an incarnation of Kṛṣṇa. And so he was conceived in the womb of his mother by Srila Vyasadeva. But his mother, she was a queen, she couldn't bear to look at Vyasadeva because he had been performing austerities and he was very thin and his hair was matted and he was unkept and probably unclean because he was just doing austerities. And she couldn't look at him. So the conception took place and a soul was attracted to that union, and that was Dhritarasthra. Because she closed her eyes, he was born blind. And because she closed her eyes to an incarnation of God, he was also born blind to religion, blind to the spiritual path. So he was blind two ways. So I'm wondering, who is that soul that took birth like that? It's such a unique, interesting part that soul played 5,000 years ago, who was opposed to the devotees of the Lord and always trying to cause a problem for the devotees. So I found it. Google's so smart. Google knows everything. So here's the explanation. Dhritarasthra, in his previous birth, was a tyrant king who one day saw a swan surrounded by 100 cygnets. I guess those are baby swans. What a sight that would be so beautiful. But he ordered to poke out the eyes of the swan and kill all the 100 baby swans just for his pleasure. Man, that's the caliber of the soul that took birth, Dhritarashtra. In his next birth, he was born blind, and all his sons were killed in the Kurukshetra war. Just for pleasure, he poked the eyes out of his mother swan and killed all her babies. Just the thought of it, I feel sick to my stomach. The character, the caliber of someone like that. But we know these things go on in the world. But that's who Dhritarashtra was in a previous life. So now that I've heard that, I really don't feel bad for him at all. I always had like a little, oh, poor Dhritarashtra, poor guy, No, knowing this, no, poor Dhritarashtra. Squash him like a bug, please. But Kṛṣṇa, instead, he went through the pain and suffering of losing everything, the kingdom, his sons, everything. And he also got to hear the Bhagavad Gita. So, Kṛṣṇa is very merciful like that. And evidently, Kṛṣṇa needed someone to play the part of the protagonist, or antagonist, I don't know, the one that's the aggressor, to get this Kurukshetra going. Hare Krishna Indrajit, Haribol. Yeah, I just found out who Dhritarashtra was in his previous life. He was pretty bad, man. He was a king, a vicious king, and just for fun, he had the eyes of a swan poked out and all her babies killed, just for the pleasure of it. So that's who Dhritarashtra was in his previous life. If he did that once, he was doing all kinds of things. He was a pretty bad character. He was really disgusting, causing such pain and suffering just for the pleasure of it. Oh man. Kṛṣṇa. Woo! Alright, so that's Dhritarashtra. So we're reading in Bhagavad Gita, this is text 40. It's one of the famous verses. They're all famous, but this one is just, it's got some special clout to it. It's chapter 2, text 40, and Kṛṣṇa is explaining to Arjuna about Buddhi Yoga, or working Krishna consciousness. Previously, he explained about the nature of the soul. It's eternal, it doesn't die, it can't be changed, it can't be cut by weapons, it can't be burnt by fire. It's actually invisible because it's not a material item, so you can't see it with material eyes, but exists. And like the sun exists in the universe, and its rays and energies permeate everything. The soul within the body is like that. The energy from the soul is carried throughout the whole body in the form of consciousness. So by the symptoms we can understand exists. So now Kṛṣṇa says to Arjuna, he says, nehābhikrama-nāśo asti, pratyavāyo na vidyate, svalpam asya dharmasya, trāyate, mahato, bhayāt. In this endeavor, there's no loss or diminution, and a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. Later on, when Kṛṣṇa says, in the 18th chapter, he says, just surrender to me, give up all varieties of religiosity, and just surrender to me. I'm the goal of it all anyway. Just surrender to me, and I will protect you from sinful reaction. So when here in this verse it says, protect them from the most dangerous type of fear, it's fear, what I see here is fear of sinful reaction, which is what Arjuna is wrestling with. What is my course of action? If I fight this war, certainly I'll get sinful reactions. They're my teachers, my relatives. So this is what Arjuna is wrestling with, is what is my course of action that has no sinful reaction? And Kṛṣṇa's Bhagavad Gita, 18 chapters, explains what that course is. Hare Kṛṣṇa. The Prabhupada's purport. Activity in Kṛṣṇa consciousness, or acting for the benefit of Kṛṣṇa without expectation of sense gratification, is the highest transcendental quality of work. Even a small beginning of such activity finds no impediment, nor can that small beginning be lost in any stage. Any work begun on the material plane has to be completed. Otherwise, the whole attempt is a failure. But any work begun in Kṛṣṇa consciousness has a permanent effect, even though not finished. The performer of such work is therefore not at a loss, even if his work in Kṛṣṇa consciousness is incomplete. 1% done in Kṛṣṇa consciousness bears permanent results, so that the next beginning is from the point of 2%. Whereas in material activity, without 100% success, there's no profit. Ajāmila performed his duty in some percentage of Kṛṣṇa consciousness, but the result he enjoyed at the end was 100% by the grace of the Lord. There's a reference here to Ajāmila. Ajāmila is one of the oldest accounts in the Vedas. It's in a very old Purana, and it illuminates the power of chanting the holy names of the Lord. Ajāmila was born in a Brahmin family and became distracted by sex desire for a prostitute, illicit connection. And he spent his life with the prostitute in order to support himself. He was banned from regular society. So in order to support himself, he engaged in lying, cheating, stealing, gambling, however he could get money to support his life. So he became quite degraded. And even at a very old age, I forget how old he was, like 80 or something, he had conceived a small child who was playing near his bed. And as he was leaving the body, the agents of Yamaraj were coming because of his activities. He didn't qualify for going higher, he was going lower, because he had a lot of sinful reactions. But he had named his small child Narayan. And at the time, when he saw the Yamadutas, were quite frightening looking, coming to pull him out, pull the soul out, he called out for his small son. Narayan. Hare Krishna, it's the name of the Lord. The Vishnu Dutas, when they heard someone calling for Lord Narayan, they got in their airplanes, and there was a confrontation between the agents of Yamaraj and the servants of the Lord from Vaikuntha. And it was concluded that because he called out for the Lord, all his sins were nullified. Now that's not a license to go out and do anything and everything. But his calling out was pure. He was in total distress and he called out. But he didn't even call out for the Lord. He just vibrated the name of the Lord. That's how powerful. So this is a very old account It's one of the oldest accounts in the Vedas. It's a very old Purana. So, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, Ajāmila performed his duty in some percentage of Krishna consciousness, but the result he enjoyed at the end was 100% by the grace of the Lord. So he didn't execute devotional service in his life, but at some point before he really took a downturn, he was performing. He was acting as a Brahmin. Brahmins are very dear to Krishna. And then at the time of death, he called out for Krishna. So whatever percentage he had done, he cashed in on it 100%. Prabhupada says there's a nice verse in this connection in the Bhagavatam. Sanskrit here, I'm going to read the translation. If someone gives up self-gratificatory pursuits and works in Krishna consciousness and then falls down on account of not completing his work, what loss is there on his part? And what can one gain if one performs his material activities perfectly? Or, as the Christians say, what profiteth a man if he gain the whole world, yet suffer the loss of his eternal soul? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama. That's how powerful devotional service is, and it begins with hearing and chanting. And even if it doesn't go beyond hearing and chanting, that's perfect in itself. Hare Krishna. Material activities and their results end with the body, but work in Krishna consciousness carries the person again to Krishna consciousness, even after the loss of the body. Because it's this gross, subtle body that is, this gross material body is the one that dies. The subtle body, it doesn't actually die when the gross body is shed. That carries one to the next gross body. At least one is sure to have a chance in the next life of being born again as a human being, either in the family of a great cultured Brahmin or in a rich aristocratic family that will give one a further chance for elevation. That is the unique quality of work done in Krishna consciousness. Yeah, that's one of my favorite verses. Nehābhikrama-nāśo asti pratyavāyo vidyate svalpam asya dharmasya trāyate mahato bhayāt. In this endeavor, there's no loss or diminution, and a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear, sinful reaction. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Rama.